All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. And we're going to be powering through the end of Shadow Rising. We said we would get through it. I think we can. Um,
If we stay focused, we can, because I don't.
I think most of our thoughts are going to be on the last two chapters anyway, because the where we left off was chapter 48, an offer refused, page 788. That is where we were going to start it up, but there's not a ton about these three chapters that jumped out at me to talk about.
Yeah, because you just get a little bit more into Aiel culture when you get to Cold Rock's Hold, which we're going to get a heavy dose of that in
Right.
Fires of Heaven. And we actually talked about that last time because I made reference to kind of the influences of it with like the Hopi Indians and the way their holds were set up as well. So, and you get a little bit of agriculture and how it's kind of efficient in a low kind of resource type area, which is kind of important a little bit. But I guess realistically to the storyline, it's just little tidbits to set you up for more Aiel culture and maybe why they do things the way they do.
I think he's also trying to justify the thing you've been complaining about, which is the numbers of how there are so many of them, because all of the wetlanders are pretty shocked when they get to Cold Rock's Hold of how big it is, of how many people are there, that it's a good sized town, and they were expecting, a small little village type thing. And so I think he's also trying to justify the numbers that we're going to see, and we get a little bit of those numbers when they're taught when Rand is talking to Rourke about bringing the whole clan, not just his sept, not just the honor guard and all that. It's like, no, call everybody you can that can get here as fast as they can, because he's expecting trouble.
Yeah, and this is where he kind of gets in trouble, kind of crossing streams. Is he did for the Aiel use a lot of Native American influence, but then he also used African tribal cultures as influence as well. And there's specific tribes in Africa where we get to the polygamy part of this, where it actually makes perfect sense because the males, when they become men, go off to war, and they're tribal. They're basically the warriors of the tribe, and they raid other tribes and get resources because resources are scarce. It's kind of getting close to kind of that Ethiopian area, and resources are scarce, so they fight over that and basically retire when they're 25, and now they can marry. Well, there's a lot less males at that point because most of them die, and if you live, you're one of the worthy to marry. And so you typically have multiple wives. Where he shoots himself in the foot here culturally is he has the maidens of the spear. And so now we don't just have the men going off to war, we have the maidens as well. So it doesn't justify the polygamy bend as much. So he kind of crossed streams and kind of got himself in trouble there from a realistic standpoint.
Well, yes and no, because I never got the impression that it was that prevalent, that it does happen, but because it's a twist on the way it normally happens, whereas that it's not male focused, it's up to the women. So I always got the impression it's not incredibly prevalent. It's just done and accepted. If that's the way it works, if that's the way it works out.
So more like a Scandinavian egalitarian society, but then the people actually tend to go to more towards what the gender roles tend to be, the more egalitarian the society is. But we didn't know that back when Jordan wrote these books. So if he did that, it was accidental, I would guess.
Yeah. The only other thing, we do get a little bit of Avienda kind of softening and acting like a human being. So there is a little bit of interaction there. I just don't want to go into it, but one of the things I've been complaining about in spoilers is how their relationship unfolds. And maybe someone else sees something more there, but we don't get a lot. We just see kind of the beginnings of, oh, okay, she's not a terrible witch, and she can act like a reasonable person. But there's not a ton there. And then we get to the weirdness happening inside Rand's dream. Which again, chapter 50, we get the iconography of the crescent moon and stars and the title of Traps. So but I don't know that there's necessarily anything new there. I think what he's doing is reinforcing what we saw kind of way back in the beginning with Lanfear's interactions with Rand early on. I think he's kind of reinforcing that here. Did you have any other thoughts on those 3 chapters, or should we skip to the meat of it?
Let's skip to the meat.
All right.
Because I think anything on the peddler wagons actually can be looked at in hindsight when we get to the meat.
Yeah. So then that jumps to chapter 57, a breaking in the threefold land, 943. Oy vey, this is a long book.
Yep.
All right.
Fires of Heaven is longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scott agreed with you that Fires of Heaven got better at the more rereads he did.
So we get a little bit of kind of what I was talking about a couple sessions ago with the Rand or not getting the Rand perspective. So Jordan keeps us from knowing how he knows what he knows. But he does keep it at least a little realistic with when they top the rise and Rourke looks down and is kind of surprised at how many Couladin brought. And he's, see, where is it? Yeah, on page 947. Did you expect this? Rourke asked Rand as soon as the red shield left. Is that why you summoned the entire clan? Not this exactly, Rourke. The Shida began forming lines in the narrow gap into the mountains. They were veiling themselves, but there was no other reason for Couladin to leave in the night except that he was eager to be somewhere. And where would he better like to be than here, causing me trouble? So he knows, he kind of knows that, you know, the Shadow, the Forsaken are working against him, even if he doesn't know exactly how. So I think you get a little of that there. All right, so what did you want to, because you were looking through this before we started and going down some rabbit holes. What were you mostly wanting to focus on?
Well, I think kind of the 2 main events were Rand's refusal to do this thing in private, and then the clan chief's reaction to it, with Couladin spitting in him and Han, and then the fight with Asmodean, and then the subsequent fallout from after that. Well, to set the stage, basically they all get together and everything's tense, and there's supposed to be peace here, but it almost keeps breaking out into fighting. And Couladin gives his piece about going into Rhuidean, and Rand is about to give his piece, and the chiefs want to do it in private because you're not allowed to talk about these things, but he says it aloud to everybody. And then the clan chiefs speak up. I think it's Bale, right? It speaks up, and Couladin's just like, yeah, he's gonna back me. And his answer is Rand al'Thor is he who comes with the dawn, because it was obvious to everybody who'd been into Rhuidean that Couladin had not.
And Couladin is so crazed. He does seem to, I think, Rand is thinking this. He seems to have convinced himself that he actually had been, that he actually knew what he was talking about, because he's just so crazed.
Remind me to Saki back to this, because there's a plan that was going on, and you'd think that would have been part of it.
But I think one of the more interesting things to me is why Rand does it in the first place, why he won't go off and talk about it in private. And I do think it's because a big part of why he's here is referenced at the beginning of the book, which is he wants to have a people who will follow him without, fighting, conquering, cajoling, playing the game of houses. And he thinks that these people will follow him, but he's not quite as hard as he thinks he is or is trying to be at this point, because he does want them to know the truth and know, all right, if you're going to follow me, this is what it means.
Which is interesting, because he kind of knows what's best, because he comes from the outside looking in, without thousands of years of culture to cloud the situation. But you have to understand that culture to sell the product. I should have put Saul Alinsky's book up. He talks about this. Told you the man's a genius, crazy, and not the greatest person in the world, but he's a genius. And this was one of his things about motivating crowds, was you needed to actually get in and understand the culture before you try to convince them of what they should be doing. And this is what Rand is doing. He kind of sees what he needs. He needs that, like you just described, the people to follow him for him. But he didn't understand the culture enough to say, well, I'm just going to throw 2,000 years on its head with people who die learning this truth when they're the best of the best. And so that was a misread, we'll call it, to some degree. I mean, he got it semi right. It was partially right.
All right, and then everything goes to heck, and he does some magic juju, and then
we meet Savannah.
We do. So that's the first time we meet her. Won't be the last.
Which she, I think, spoilers aside later, she overplays her part, but right here it's okay.
All right, so 962, is that where you wanted to really get into it?
Is that
when
where
Lanfear? That's when Lanfear shows up, and she's ticked off. You utter fool, playing games with these other fools, wasting all my planning and effort. I didn't expect you to reveal yourself yet, he said quietly. I know you are not alone. Where is he? So he knows plenty if he doesn't know, the details of their plan. He still knows plenty, and it still is both interesting and aggravating to me that we have no good idea, I feel like, how the frick he figured this out.
Well, we never learn what he learned in the first doorway.
Yeah. We get hints of it. We get hints of at least two answers. So best to my knowledge, we get hints of two answers. I don't even know that we get a hint of the third one. But we can talk about that more later or in spoilers. So, I mean, he could have used that, or one of those answers could have given him a hint, combined with
You know what? Maybe not, because remember he was talking with Matt earlier, and Matt says maybe they always tell them to go to Rhuidean.
Well, no, he figured that one out on his own with the
Yeah,
studying
and
and
he
the
said they
books he
never
did.
told me to come here.
Yeah,
And so probably any questions around that were probably not even there too.
maybe,
Yeah.
but it could have given him a hint on that, plus Lanfear just coming to him and trying to seduce him that way before of I can get one of the others to teach you and we
Mhm.
can rule together. Um,
Well, you get another Rand moment where he can't kill a girl.
yep.
Not that he probably could have, even if he wanted to there, but
Not yet.
he still makes the choice not to versus just failing in the process. But then, oh, go ahead.
Um, and then he acts without knowing. Again, and it gives her pause. So it helps explain. Besides the fact of, I think we've seen enough of her personality to know why she doesn't just, deal with him, because she wants to win him. But also, he does enough without thinking, without consciously understanding what he's doing, that I think it does keep the Forsaken a little bit off balance because they don't know what they don't know. They don't know how much. I mean, this is someone who was the best of them in their time and fought the shadow to a standstill despite all of its uh all of the pros and all of the lights cons that it had going for it, and Luce Theron managed to fight them to a standstill, and then ultimately seal the bore, if imperfectly. So if they think even part of that is still there in Rand, it's going to keep them off balance.
Yeah, this is something interesting. Maybe we talk about it in spoilers, although it's not a spoiler. Is we hear about Luce Theron fighting
Mhm.
against the Dark One in the last battle, and we hear about all the Forsaken who were the best of the best in their dirty, dastardly ways, but we don't hear about anybody else that is a counter to that.
We
You
just
know,
know that we know that Luce Theron had the
had the
100
100 companions,
companions.
yeah. But I mean, 100 against 13, basically, plus some dreadlords, and it almost would have been nice to hear about some of the good-sided people on his side that might have been good, which we got one in the series, whoever that Amiralin seat was. But the way the book is written, you almost think that the best of the best all went to the dark except for Luce.
Yes. Yeah.
Which when you think about humans in power, that's not that unrealistic.
Mhm.
Though there should have been one or two that stood out on the other side. But as we digress.
All right. The traps of, however you say that word.
Righty.
Yeah. Um,
Scott was pronouncing it your way, by the way. I think that was like 3 episodes ago. He put
okay.
his pronunciation
Well,
in.
I'm glad somebody's with me here.
And he was reading these books maybe even before I was.
So I'll let you get into it in a second, but we see here, because he sees the thread, the black cord,
Mhm.
and we don't get any indication that anyone else can see that. And I don't know if we're ever given any hint as to how in the world he sees it.
Well, and this is again one of those things that was inconsistent, because he saw it around Baalzamon. No, excuse me, Agenor in the first book, but then he doesn't see it on Baalzamon.
No, I thought he did.
Did he?
I thought he cut that in at the end of the Eye of the World
No, he cut it on Agenor.
when he was fighting him. I thought he did on both. Maybe not.
But then we don't see it with Samael or Ravin or any of those people. And Ravin, he spoiler, he even sees in the World of Dreams, but he doesn't see that. which
Well, he doesn't always see it because he has seen other males in the world of dreams in those kind of nightmares before he knew what they were with the bridges and everything. He doesn't always see it. And I don't know that I've ever seen a good explanation of.
that's why I use the word inconsistent,
Yes.
because you think he would see it all the time because it should be there all the time, according to what
Yeah.
happens at the end of this book. Yeah.
Right. That is a tangible connection to the Dark One that protects them from the taint somehow.
Mhm.
That it's some kind of buffer around them so that they can draw inside in without touching the taint. So they use the power all the time. They embrace the source practically all the time. It's second nature to them.
Well, other than Ishamael, the other ones are only recently now using the source since the taint was created. They were sealed when the taint was created.
Yeah.
Now we get explanation that it protects
No,
them from the taint.
my point
but
was if it I was going somewhere there and I think I said the part of it in my head instead of out loud. If it had something to do with them using the power, then Rand had plenty of other opportunities to see it.
Mhm.
So it's not just about, oh, well, he sees the cord now because Asmodean's channeling. Well, he's seen it at other times where it wasn't clear that channeling was happening. And there have been plenty of other opportunities where channeling could have been happening and he didn't see it. So,
well, maybe it's only channeling in the world of dreams, or which I think the skimming is part of. I think the skimming is equated to when Egwene goes from the little dots.
are those the only times he's seen it? Now that you bring that up, I think that may be
Because
the only
because
time
we
he's
also
seen
talked
it.
about the Eye of the World being a hub for the world of dreams too, which he saw with Agenor and Alzamon.
And
I
I think
maybe it's not inconsistent. I wish he would have made it more clear, but
yeah, I think all of his interactions, except when he shows up in the stone, physically in the stone at the end of the Dragon Reborn, all of his interactions with Balsamon are in the world of dreams. And then there's that brief moment in the real world, but then he flees into the world of dreams and he chases after him. So
the only inconsistency there is the spoiler one that I talked about from book 5. Because that fight was all in the world of dreams.
Yeah. That could have just been that he never got close enough to really see because of the way that fight happens. So you could kind of rationalize that one. But we'll have to take keep that in mind and take a closer look when we get there, which, relatively speaking, isn't that far off. But it is curious since you brought it up, how many more things about the world of dreams that we're noticing, tie-ins and connections and things that might be important about the world of dreams. And in fact, after they leave the skimming, I think he doesn't see it anymore. He just knows it's there and he can feel it when he channels. So when he cuts it, he's not seeing it. He's just feeling it and he knows it's there.
Okay, so let's progress and we'll cross
Okay.
that bridge when we get there. One of these episodes that's real World of Dreams heavy. Did I ever explain how dreams actually work?
We've talked about it a little bit.
To the Wheel of Time stuff though. Because I think I brought it up in one of our regular episodes way back when, but dreams are cool how your brain works, by the way. It's interesting. Okay, so he skims.
Yeah.
And this
We're right.
We're right. You found what?
970. He had not seen those strange things like black steel wires around Asmodean since leaving the dark place, but he could visualize them even in the void, place them in his mind around the Forsaken. So because he's in the void, because he can focus, he can find them even though he can't see them, Daredevil style. So yeah, it even says there's our clue, and I've never noticed it before, that he had not seen those strange things since leaving the dark place. since leaving that in between place where skimming happens that's somehow connected to the world of dreams.
Well, there you go.
Now it's just okay, but what about the world of dreams and why Rand? So
Well, we don't know about other male channelers in the world of dreams.
could be.
We never get a perspective of a male channeler in the world of dreams except for Rand.
Mhm.
So
All right, but where were you going with the?
it just okay. So as with Lanfear's surprise, it was obviously a Lews Therin kind of poking his head through to teach him to do the skimming. So this is one of those moments where we start seeing the taking control sometimes. But then we also see that he's a quick learner because he's following Asmodean and he's basically learning as he goes. Almost to his detriment because he loses a heel to his boot, but it's another little insight into how quickly he can pick things up, which shows a high intelligence.
Mhm.
Oh, damn.
Uh,
Cardinal on my crepe myrtle out front. I have not seen a cardinal here yet until now.
I wish I could keep them around my garden because they chase away other birds because they're pretty territorial.
Oh, there's 5 of them. Oh, it must be mating season. Because one of them is not as bright red. The one female and 4 dudes trying to get her. Which was funny because I saw
Sausage party.
I saw 2 guy squirrels fighting over a girl squirrel the other day. Man, they get vicious.
Okay. So poor Rand, we see part of his what's going to affect his psychology in the next book here with how depressed he is, and Lanfear kind of, I'm wondering if Lanfear purposely or accidentally rubs it in when she talks about how thoroughly that he's destroyed the place and that the wards are failing, however it was shielded is failing, and she can't even detect exactly how it was shielded anymore because their fight had destroyed it, and he's looking around at Avendasora and all the ruined buildings, and getting inside his own head a little bit. And I have to think, I mean, it could be that she's just that kind of a evil witch, but she's also really cunning. So I kind of feel like she's twisting the dagger a little bit, trying to tell him, look, this is who you are. Stop fighting me, join me, because this is who you are. You are a destroyer. And that's definitely going to get in his head and stay there.
Let's go back to Rand severing the.
Okay.
Because of. We got to kind of go into the nature of that bond, because when he severed it, the thing that comes out at me is there seemed to be 2 of them in that moment. And I'm trying to figure out what that is. It was like 2 states of being that pull away from each other and then all of a sudden snap back together. That I don't know where he was going with that. And I don't know if you want to try to talk it out or maybe come back to it.
I don't know, because the one thing that kind of jumps out at me, the one thing I think of is kind of super spoilery. It's a couple books ahead. So
okay, so spoilers to Asmodean. I liked Asmodean, by the way. I thought he was a fun character. And he's not that weak if you look at the power ratings in here.
Right.
He's just the weakest living Forsaken. Which male Forsaken. He's stronger than Lanfear.
Yeah. Which is why she shields him like that. Because she can.
Well, he was also like exhausted.
Huh, now that we're on this and I'm thinking about it, he can see the ones on the min, but as he points out, she's connected too somehow, and it makes me wonder if she has something that a woman could see. You chosen, he knew taunting her was dangerous, but he could not stop himself. Gave your souls to the Dark One. You let him attach himself to you. How many times had he replayed his battle with Baalzamon? How many times before he began to suspect what those black wires were? I cut him off from the Dark One, Lanfear. I cut him off. And she is shocked as Rhuidean is. I did not think it was possible. And then he makes her think again because his logic is pretty harsh there. He's cut off, so he can't go back to the Chosen now. Would the Dark One take him? Would he make it that far before the Chosen pounced on him? He has no choice but to help me now. And it's pretty cold, and Lanfear feels like that's not a loose Theron thing. And then Asmodean screws up by calling her Myron, and she freaks out.
Yeah. Oh, I like how he has his Darth Vader moment right before that. No.
All right. Any other thoughts here, or are we already into spoiler territory?
Well, I mean, I guess we have to finish it off because he does go back.
He does go back. He does make things weird. He's got to know that people are going to find this incredibly weird, that he disappears into a hole in reality and he comes back with Jason Natal, the Gleeman. But apparently he just shrugs it off, and people accept it because here you go.
Yeah. We all have to die sometime, as Gaul would say. Yeah, it really ends abruptly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's spoiler time.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything else to add to that, except it is it is a habit of Jordan's, or habit style, as part of his style, that the climax of all the books come
climax.
Yeah, they really speed up towards the end, and so it's a whole lot of setup it's a whole lot of foreplay for 5 seconds of excitement. If we're gonna go ahead and stick with the analogy, that does end abruptly. I'm not making this any better, and I'm just not gonna try because there's no way around it. And I do think, as much as I like
with
this
Asmodean flopping onto his back, panting and heaving, is the way it was described in the book.
Yeah, exactly. I do think this is one of the worst, though, of the sudden ending. Like, it is very abrupt.
Well, in a lot of them, you get an epilogue after.
Yeah.
And this one was just like plop.
I do feel like that really helps Dragon Reborn, that you do get that little epilogue at the end where they're sitting around in the stone talking, even though it's only a couple pages. You get a little bit of an epilogue at the end of The Great Hunt too, I think, which really helps when Rand kind of wakes up. there after everything's happened. Uh, and I feel like I'm not sure how many of them don't have an epilogue, but that's definitely one that could have used one because of how abruptly it ends and how, uh, you know, action movie crazy the last couple of chapters get. And that was just those two chapters. It's all of the chapters because all of the storylines come tumbling together at the end, and you've got the battle against Rhuidean in Tanchico with the girls, and then you've got the final battle at Emmons Field with Perrin, and then the last two chapters of the book are those two chapters with the knockdown drag out with Asmodine. And so my only criticism of the book is he does such a good job of setting it up, and then it's just bam right at the end. And I think we needed a little something to help, step down instead of just end.
Well, in Jordan's slight defense on this, the Shadow Rising, we had to end with the Rand arc as the book goes because of just the implications of it. But the Shadow Rising was Perrin 2.0. It was Perrin's story realistically, and then the beginnings of Matt's story. So Rand was just to keep the story going in a lot of ways, and it's almost like that plop. Maybe he should have ended with Perrin's fight in the Two Rivers instead of. But again, 14 books with culminate with Rand. It's you almost can't do that, but from a story, from a just leaving everything hanging standpoint, maybe it would have been better to do it the other way, or just to think of it that way.
Because that is a nice, they ride off into the sunset and live happily ever after for Perrin's story. Of the way his chapter ends there, which I think actually, now that you mention it, would have really worked because it would have given you a nice false sense of security right before everything burns apart in the fires of heaven.
But what even you could do that like from a so I'm thinking of this from a story standpoint. I'm visualizing it in my head. You have Perrin's the happily ever after for a moment, and then you have the little cutscene that says, and in the meantime, and everything's going to fucking hell in the waste. It's like, sorry.
Oops.
Oopsie.
Yep. All right. So going into spoilers now, we had a few things to talk about, to get into, and then we might rant about the show a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So while I'm thinking about it, the first thing to pop into my mind about the double vision is what happens when Rand is in Shadar Logoth and the balefire poles meet, and there's a weird shivering double vision thing that happens there.
Yeah, but that's definitely explained because basically their souls meet, and now you get this dual soul where they can actually feel each other the rest of the series.
It was the first thing to pop in my head, and the only thing I could think of when Rand mentioned, and it was kind of reinforced by Rand saying you bound your souls to him, or you bound yourselves to him, you let him attach himself to your souls. So I almost feel like
that's the key word, souls.
But
and so we've got, and so my first thought was Rand and Luce Theron has kind of this dualistic thing. What about all the Forsaken? Asmodian is somebody reborn.
Well, no, I just think that Souls was speaking about the Forsaken as a group, the Forsaken plural. I'm wondering if that double vision was Jordan saying that's the soul in the body. If he was seeing the soul in the body.
Okay, I see what you're saying. But the soul seems to be the most recent culmination of it before you, where Rand is Luce Theron, but he's not all the other dragons before.
True.
And Asmodian, being a super important character, is somebody else reborn who is probably somebody of great note, if you really think about the way these worlds keep playing out.
Could be, but I get the impression from what we from what we hear from Birgitte and from what little bit we see when they show up, when the Heroes of the Horn show up, that there aren't that many of them and that they know each other. Because they
know each other on the
recognize-
light side.
They recognize Luce Theron. Well, that's a good point. What would happen to a soul bound to the wheel if it turned dark?
Well, but also remember too, Asmodean was bound. Then all the Arthur Hawkwing stuff happened, and the heroes were born, and then he comes back the same person, not a reborn Asmodean. He comes back Asmodean that was bound, and so all of his soul stuff happened before the heroes were formed. Because Arthur Hawkwing was 1,000 years after.
Yeah, but
Asmodean
because Hawkwing shows up as Hawkwing, I get the feeling that he's a new hero.
Mm-hmm.
That Hawkwing, Hawkwing bound himself to the wheel by his deeds in
So
this
you're thinking
life.
he's the last one that was bound?
Yeah, that whereas Birgitte constantly talks about former lives, about being spun out and different things that she's done, and and those are all different names, different guises. But Hawkwing is there as Hawkwing.
Well, something to look out for going forward is look for any nuance with Birgitte talking about Mohidian.
Yeah,
because that's her only contact with a Forsaken.
Yeah, well, yeah. So we can talk about this more when we get there, because she does mention it. Yeah, I think she goes into that more in the Fires of Heaven when she talks about that.
But that is still covered though with your body and soul thing. So it was just interesting the way he described it, and how he chooses his words carefully.
Yeah, and
you see that in a couple other places, like you said, with the crossing of the streams, but also with talks where Luce Theron and Rand, and visions from Min, dreams from Egwene about Rand and two people. So you kind of see similar things going forward, and it all has to do with that soul, that past life.
And to Jordan, I think both personally and in the work, the soul is not just a philosophical idea. It is a tangible thing.
And it would make sense in this situation because the soul would be what was bound to the Dark One, not the body.
Yeah. I mean, that's he does call himself the Lord of the Graves, right? And is called that, and we do see evidence of that, of the powers that he has, especially for those who are bound. That because he does have that connection, he can grab that soul and he can stick it somewhere else.
Well, when we go back to our World of Dreams connection, when you go into the World of Dreams, not physically, what is that? It's probably your representation of your soul versus actually going into the World of Dreams physically, which is apparently dangerous because
and
you don't belong.
More to that point, we get we're going to get this more when we get more of Egwene stuff in the next couple of books of her training, or the next book of her training with the Wise Ones. And she talks about when she's floating in that kind of black expanse between dreams, that she's having an out of body experience. So now, it could be that that's what they're doing.
Add to that, all of the Forsaken can go to the World of Dreams, can dream. All the Forsaken can dream. But dreaming is a talent. Maybe it's their cord that lets them go there. All because every single 100% Forsaken can enter the World of Dreams.
Well, but we don't know when they're there. We don't know if they're there physically or not, because they have no compunction about going there physically.
This is true, but it does seem like they're not.
Yeah. Especially in that weird bridge place in the first couple of books, because that very much seems like a World of Dreams place.
Well, and you see a lot of where's Demandred, da, 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 and we find out later why his time zone would be different. And it would make more sense that he has to be sleeping to do it if he can't do it at certain times because he's, which is a clue that we never got until actually reading the end.
Yeah. Well, and we do find out from Egwene's training that if you are a stronger dreamer, it's easier to put yourself there when you're not fully asleep. So just because they all may know how to do it doesn't mean they're all strong in it, which again, we see later. So what were the other spoilery things you wanted to talk about?
So the statement that I thought of but I didn't want to say because it was spoilery, but it was only spoilery for this book and we hadn't gotten there yet, was we talked about Couladin and he had the two dragons as well, but he didn't know the story. And Asmodean knows the story.
No, he doesn't. He knows part of the story.
He knows at least who the Jin-El were.
Yeah.
And
he knows
what the Isle were to begin with. Why didn't he at least brief him on that?
Because he makes comments later. Lanfear makes the comments. We see the Forsaken, the people from the Age of Legends commenting on, but he doesn't know the full story because he has no idea what happened after the breaking. He just knows who the Isle used to be in the Age of Legends.
But at least that information would have, that was the.
But would Couladin have believed him?
Well, this is true.
Would Couladin have believed him? And did Asmodean care enough about how successful Couladin was so much as he just wanted him to get in the way?
Or did he also just not expect Rand to tell everybody everything?
True. And Rand got there quicker than maybe he thought he would. That he was hoping that Couladin would have, those handful of clans behind him before Rand even got there. And then it would be an Aiel civil war that Rand was having to deal with while Asmodean was off doing what he was doing.
Which I also don't understand why Asmodean didn't just leave in the middle of the night one night and get a head start. That also would have been beneficial, but we wouldn't have a book, if.
Yeah, this is true.
This is
I'm sure we could rationalize a reason for it if we thought enough. Very rarely does, even if he doesn't give us an answer for those kinds of things, I feel like I have found some, but I couldn't tell you one off the top of my head where I have thought of a plot hole or have read on a message board where someone said, hey, this seems like a plot hole to me. And even if you're not sure that that's absolutely the correct answer, someone can come up with a rationalization based on citations from the book. So very rarely does Jordan leave. That's why the books are so appealing, because he doesn't just shove Egwene off a cliff into a river and not tell you what the hell is going on.
Hey, you survived. Let's braid your hair.
We
randomly kill village girls just to see if they're women.
Everything has set up and payoff. There is a structure there so that there's ultimate satisfaction when you get to that payoff, and because it makes sense. I think one of the failings of the Marvel movies, of why they've been struggling since Endgame, is that so much of it doesn't make sense, is because they're trying so hard to top themselves that they keep coming up with more and more fantastical things, which just leave more questions. And so you don't get that satisfaction. And I use the example a couple of sessions ago of Top Gun Maverick, where you can poke holes in the plot. It absolutely. And I was watching a panel of actual Top Gun graduates and instructors talk about it. And they said, look, you can, if you think really hard about it, I could come up with a scenario why this doesn't work and why we wouldn't have to use F-18s to do this mission. But they give you a line that's believable enough, and then they don't dwell on it. They move on so that even if it's not perfect, they've set the stage and they've done it in a believable way. And that's important because when you're talking about something that is fantasy, you know, even something that's grounded in reality, like a Top Gun, however loosely, but certainly when you're talking about something with monsters and magic, you have to give the audience enough that they can suspend disbelief to immerse themselves in the story. That's what makes the story engaging. That's why people went nuts for the first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones, because even though you had an incredibly fantastical tale, you had characters that were very real and believable because they were all very human. They were all very flawed. And even if the setting was alien, those flaws were not alien.
Lots of Game of Thrones hate on the message board I was on earlier.
Well, there's a new prequel coming out and it looks fantastic.
I'll give it a shot because they have gotten the feedback and we'll see what comes out of that because there was a lot of backlash out of that season.
It will be interesting to see if they learn their lesson because, you know, I brought up Marvel because they're not learning their lesson and that they had a big, you know.
Yeah, but Marvel's owned by Disney. That's why.
That's a big part of it. Yeah, they are definitely not learning their lesson and it shows. And from the rabbit hole you went down, neither is Amazon. They are not learning their lesson.
Oh, should I just bring it up?
Yeah, and with all of the uproar over the Rings of Power, which isn't even out yet. So
I wanted to talk about one more thing before I go into the show. Scott brought up something with the tower, and he didn't want to spoil anything in the comments, but there are events in the new spring that affect events in the White Tower now. Do you remember what that was? Because I haven't read New Spring in I got it when it first came out.
I'm not even sure I ever reread it. I always meant to, I always meant to reread it in my rereads, and I can't ever remember rereading it. I reread the first part of it when it came out in graphic novel form, and a friend had the graphic novels, not all of them, but just the first couple of volumes that had come out. Really good art, by the way, really good comic book art. And so I remember rereading that, and there is a lot of the setup for Moiraine and so on, but then also the Black Ajah, because that's when the Black Ajah kind of reveals itself. It had always been, you know, a myth, a boogeyman, a story, and they do kind of reveal themselves, sort of there.
Got it
but
right there.
only,
it's probably the shortest book in the whole series. I should.
Yeah. We should stick that in somewhere. So the question is where of, you know, open it up to the comments. Where should we read New Spring?
Because it came out between two books. Which two books did it come out?
It came out before Path of Daggers because all you nerds were so upset that because the Big White Book and New Spring he was working on while he was working on Path of Daggers. So
it took forever.
It took an extra 18 months to come out. And so that's how I found out about the series, because all you nerds were down in the lobby complaining about it and talking about what you thought was going to happen. And I said, okay, what are you talking about?
Then we'll piss everybody off and we'll do it then. We'll do it between Path of Daggers and the one before it. So
I was going to ask if we should do it when it comes out. And I feel like that's a good place to, because I mean, I think he did that on purpose. Of the things he revealed were all things that you could have or would have already discovered. So I think that's a good place for it, because you're not really spoiling anything. You're just kind of confirming some things.
Okay, cool.
Confirming and, you know, kind of filling in some details.
So I've got 3 books between.
Yeah, Fires of Heaven, Lord of Chaos, Crown of Swords.
Crown of Swords. Okay, so I can read that between now and then.
And then we can do New Spring before we go on to.
Okay, so I'll reread New Spring before we get to Path of Daggers, and we'll go over that.
But I assume that's what Scott's talking about is the stuff we find out about the Black Hajjah that was going on. And you get some hints of that in the next couple of books of talking about funky things, because you remember as Egwene is learning from Sawan right after she's become Amarillan, you learn about the secret histories, and so you learn that some funky stuff has happened in the tower before. And when you're talking about New Spring, that's what jumps into mind. I assume that's what he's talking about.
Okay, now we get to the cringe.
Yeah, and
Before
this
we
is what I
even
mean
saw
by
season 2, and we got any ratings.
not
real
learning their
time.
lesson. I don't even know if it's in post-production yet. They haven't had I don't know how long they've been working on it. So far as I know, they may still be filming it, and they've already renewed a season 3, despite the fact that as I was ranting, they haven't learned their lesson. Maybe HBO will have learned their lesson. We'll see, but Prime continues to piss people off and not care. It is very
Because
odd
they can
to
afford
me.
to, just like your review.
Well, yeah.
So this is the part that got me kind of this person was apparently watching a Q&A on Twitter at the time he read that, which was 6 days ago. Season 2 is based on pieces of books 1 through 3, and I hate the word on pieces because
Well, yeah.
that could mean a lot of things. That could mean that some pieces show up later, or it could mean that we're just going to do some pieces and then make up our own shit, which is probably the real answer. We get more than one Forsaken. That's all right. That's
fine.
Cool. I mean, we got to have Selene and Lanfear. We've got to have, who else shows up at that point? Well, if it's books 1 through 3, we probably get Balal or somebody along those lines. If we get to the Stone of Tyr. Favorite 2-person scene. This is what we were talking about offline. Egwene and Rhaena, which I had to look up Rhaena again.
Yeah.
She was the Soldem that was in charge of Egwene.
And we talked about that a fair bit when we did the Great Hunt, because that's some pretty compelling stuff there, and is really formative to Egwene as a character. And I just have no faith that they're going to do it well.
Oh, these are Rafe's answers. So my prediction is they have a lesbian love affair or something. And Rhaena is like the one that,
because Egwene don't need no man to break her out. She doesn't even need her woman friends, so she seduces Rhaena to get herself out. Oh, that's so believable. It hurts me to say it out loud. All right, this next one. Please tell me this is a joke, a bad joke.
No, I've got a social justice parallel to this one that I think is actually true. The girl who got killed by the Shanshan at the end of season 1 had it coming, as did the entire coastland and all its cities. Basically, this is an original sin type thing. In my eyes, that answer is an original sin type thing.
The only way that is justifiable and actually makes sense within the context of the world of the story is that, yes, to the Sanshan, from the Sanshan point of view, if that's what he means, okay. But my concern here is, I think I've mentioned this before, of the Critical Drinkers series on why modern movies suck. And one of them is they teach terrible lessons. The morality of so many modern movies is horribly screwed up. One of the most recent horrible examples is Doctor Strange 2 and WandaVision, which Doctor Strange 2 is basically WandaVision season 2. Wanda turns into a bad guy. I mean, full on villain, psychotically killing lots and lots of people. And yet, so these are her actions, and yet all the dialogue is they want you to feel sorry for her. No, she's not sympathetic. You could understand Thanos, but you didn't feel sorry for him just because his planet had died you understood him, but you didn't feel sorry for him because you recognized that he was a psychopath who was trying to literally kill half the galaxy. You can understand where the Sanshin are coming from once you hear from them and you see them and you dig into their rigidly crazy culture. But that is a really disturbing point to me without any other context, without knowing if, he's talking about from the Sanshin point of view, because otherwise that's just creepy.
But here's my prediction here, that the coastline and its cities are going to have something about them that's bad, that is worthy of punishment, and it's going to be something along a social justice bend, like they're enslaving each other or something along those lines. Something that's going to pull out his activism, and I guarantee that's going to be what it is, that every person in that society is to blame because they are them. We'll see. The next bullet point doesn't give me any more comfort. Season 2 only has 8 episodes, but they're longer, so we have to suffer longer. If you're going to give me 8 episodes, at least rip the Band-Aid. Biggest departure from the books is creating more of a story for Moraine Land, which they
have plenty of story.
Yeah. Okay, so apparently there's going to be the Matt Gowan Gallad scene, which is iconic, and I agree here. This might be one good thing that comes out of it if they do it right. But this disturbs me, and they want to do a believable version of it. The book version was believable.
Yeah.
Why do we have to change it to make it more believable? It was 2 guys who were overconfident that thought they had swords and they were better, and someone with a different background and a different weapon bested them because it was a surprise.
And the knowledge and understanding and instincts for how to use the benefits of that weapon to maximize the disadvantages of his opponent's weapon.
And this is where they shot themselves in the foot, because now you know what they can't do? They can't have him have a flashback of him and his father, or even him mention his father training him on the quarterstaffs, because they already made his father who he was in the series. Matt's plotline has changed the most compared to the books. No shit, Sherlock.
Why?
You even had to change actors because you got it so wrong in the first one.
If this is based on pieces of books 1, 2, and 3, that is Matt becoming Matt. What are you changing and why?
I don't know. I can't believe they would do this, but it's but you can almost see them making Matt a bad guy.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole thing, and
well, we talked about that with that weird, creepy ending scene of the way he goes off on his own and he's looking all evil and stuff. So yeah, who the hell knows?
Okay, this next one makes a little sense of something we disliked from the first season, but it's still stupid. It's stupid because we know what we know about how this
and because there was no context there of what was wrong with Nynaeve and what was Egwene healing. Because that's why it looked like to us, wait a minute, did Nynaeve just burn herself out and Egwene just heal it? Because that's sure what it looked
just
like.
Die and she brought her back from
or just die and she just cured death. Because the emotional rawness of that scene, unless those actresses were seriously overacting, or Egwene specifically, I mean, that was not a, oh, she hurt herself. That was an, oh, she did.
Yeah. Yep. The next one kind of pisses me off. Hopper is in season 2. This is exactly what Disney does. Oh, everybody likes Boba Fett. Let's make Mandalorian. Oh, everybody likes Yoda, Baby Yoda. And oh, everybody's crying for Hopper. Hopper's season 2, when he should have been season 1.
Mhm.
It
Setup
w-
and payoff. There's no setup.
Yeah.
There's no connection there because we never saw Perrin make that contact with Hopper.
This
That's what
is
gave him the connection, is that Perrin made that contact and then Hopper sacrificed himself for Perrin
Mhm.
while that contact was happening.
This is focus group filmmaking right here. They got everybody together or got a group of people together and we're like, who's the coolest characters kind of thing. What were we missing in the first one or anything like this is focus group filmmaking. Again, the biggest example is Mandalorian and Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
You know, everybody loves Boba Fett. Everybody loves Yoda. Let's have them both in one series.
Oh, hell. We will see more than one Karheen tier Falm. I don't know what that means. I don't care.
Of the three big cities, I think it just means we're going to see.
Oh, we'll see 2 out of those 3 at least. Is that
Yeah.
what they mean?
Yeah.
All right, fine.
Which it's got to be tier and fall me because we already have the Shanshan landing at the end of the other one, and then he talks about going through book 3.
Yeah,
as far
that's
as
tier.
Yeah.
Well, but we don't know how much of book 2 they're going to do, which would be Karheen. Weaves are getting revamped with colors and all, and then I accidentally saw the idiot below. Weaves getting some colors. This was one of my biggest gripes of the show. This was one of your biggest gripes? The lack of color for the weaves? That was a minor set dressing thing that we griped about. That is not a big gripe. Ugh, morons. All right, this one is odd to me because I've never considered this.
A lot of people back in the old message board days did because he always
Really?
describes it as a drawl.
Oh.
So
okay, so I don't know what you heard, but because of the way they're described, their armor physically, their culture, and because we watched way too many old kung fu movies in our youth, I always kind of heard something like Cantonese because that has a very slurring way of talking.
See, so I didn't know enough. I didn't know Cantonese slurred. But
it has kind of a slurring, drawling way of talking. Vietnamese, Cantonese, those southern and Southeast Asian, South China areas. That's always what I took it to mean when he talked about their drawling, slurring way of speaking.
And maybe he just expected more people to know that because I got the Texan thing too. But I got the Boomhauer talk because you know how they keep talking about how no one can understand them. Are you talking about?
Yeah, but see, the Sanshin always complain that wetlanders speak too fast and they want them to slow down.
Yeah.
And Boomhauer drawls and slurs, but he also talks really fast. That's one of his things.
Yeah. Okay, so they haven't started filming season 3 yet.
Yeah. Who is Joshua Stradowski?
He's Rand.
Okay. Needs to start regrowing his hair. I don't know what that's from. I guess he was in another thing, but then that does make me think they did finish filming season 2 because then he did something else that had him cut his hair. Whatever.
And we're getting the Dark Friends social. I'm assuming that's the Dream World meetings from the Forsaken.
Yeah, I assume he's talking about the prologue to the Great Hunt.
Oh, okay. You're probably more right because that goes more with Dark Friend because it would be Forsaken social the other way.
Yeah, and I think that's what people tend to refer to it as in the message board community.
There's a guy that was cast. He was Stipe in the show I actually liked.
Last Kingdom, Vikings.
Last Kingdom.
Okay. There's a lot of crossover.
Yeah, he was Stipe in Last Kingdom, big dude. I wonder if he's Bors because they didn't show who he was, but he was on the considered casting list.
And Bors is described as a big physical guy.
Dude. That would actually be a good casting. That because he was a good actor and he fits the mold of what you kind of get from the description of him. So that would be, if that's the first scene from the second season, I would already give the first episode better than everything else that was been before it.
True. Yeah. I mean, that would at least be starting off on the right foot.
Mm-hmm.
want to see if there's any news on a release date.
They said they're going to release it after the Lord of the Rings is over.
So season 2.
Yeah, because they're trying to like not cross streams with their audience, I guess. Nice little sarcastic comment here, which kind of gets on what we were talking about. You know, the sins of your fathers and mothers.
Yeah. 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 All right, guys,
All right.
whatever.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Anything else we want to go
I
over?
got nothing else. If Scott and any other lurkers out there comment, what did we miss? What should we have talked about? Because I know we kind of picked the things that jumped out to us the most for whatever reason. So is there something that jumped out to you that we didn't talk about in the Shadow Rising? And then we'll try and next week get on to the Fires of Heaven.
I think we addressed the comments mostly. Scott does talk about Gawain being selfish and his sister not being around as part of the change, because she kind of guided him along.
Well, she also gave him purpose, besides the fact that she has more of a level head than he does, even though she is, which is saying something. She also gave him purpose. His whole life's purpose is wrapped up in her, and now suddenly she's gone.
And then he tried to recreate that purpose with Egwene, who is kind of off and on in his life. But I actually liked our spoiler section last time because we really dove into wow, he's a psychopath. And I was kind of diving into the literature a little bit, and we have so much on these people that put the obsession on a pedestal that's not reality, but it doesn't turn out, and they turn into basically serial killers and mass shooters. But we have nothing on the people that they actually reciprocate. The female actually reciprocates. What do they become? And I think they would actually become what Jordan made him, which is just a little freaking simp. It's annoying. He is annoying. But I also was thinking a lot about it, the way he's written. I think Jordan wanted you to like him. I think this might have been actually one of his few failures in writing. I think he wanted you to like Gawain and feel sorry for him. But at the same time, everybody just started hating him.
And the one Galad is the Jaime Lannister of the series, because he's the one
minus the incest.
Minus the incest and minus the crap that happens in the last couple of seasons. But Galad is the one you're not supposed to like, and yet he's the one who actually becomes likable. He's the one who actually becomes relatable, and you go, oh, especially when you finally get a scene behind his eyes, and you're like, this is what's in his head. This is who he is. And you know what? I wouldn't necessarily want to be friends with the guy, but I can admire him, even if I don't like him. So he gets a really redemptive arc that I almost can't wait to get to, because it's going to take a while, but we see a little bit of it with the girls in the next book. But Gawain just never comes around, and I have yet to find anyone who likes him or finds his arc redeeming.
Well, if we're going to compare Game of Thrones, Gawain is like the guy that gets his dick cut off.
Greyjoy?
Greyjoy, yeah. You're kind of like cool
Greyjoy,
with him at first, and then he kind of becomes just a horrible person.
Almost out of the blue.
And then even in his redemption part, you're still kind of like, yeah, you still suck.
Yeah, whatever. You did a lot of horrible things. You have no dick, and you didn't actually accomplish anything in your final act. So
yeah.
All right, whatever.
Man, that's actually a pretty good parallel.
Man, that's depressing. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll get more into that down the road. I don't want to derail us too much because I mean he will show up and we can't talk about it more then, but
We're officially done
we are officially done.
with the Shadow Rising. We'll try to get the intro to Fires of Heaven in next week.
Mhm.
And then I'm in, I go across the pond to merry old England for a week and some change for a wedding. And then,
Exciting.
and then we'll pick up after that. So we'll at least try to get things started. So just kind of as I'm clean up, I'll be out. There'll be a break between the intro to Fires of Heaven and when we actually get in stride on that. But we're going to start going back in chronological order again.
Yeah, I do think it works better.
It just seems like it took us so long to get through this book.
Mhm.
And so it probably did. It was at least more efficient. Anything that you want to see as far as spoilers or anything, let us know in the comments. If it's truly a spoiler, put a spoiler alert on it.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That's all I got. We'll see y'all next time.
All right. And we'll try to get a social episode here in the next 2 days.
All right.
Later.